Task Force Carrier Battles in the Pacific. This is a war game published by VUCA. It is a two-player game that is not easy to play solo, although it's rated pretty high as solo on the back of the box. I think it's like 7 out of 10, which is a lot for a game that uses secret information, has no bot, and so you will, if you play solo, play two-handed solo with some adjustments, which I will mention later. So we're in the Pacific. The two sides are the Japanese versus the Allies, and it's about mainly naval operations and aircraft carrier operations. You have 10 scenarios, 4 of which are introductory scenarios and solo only, which is which may be why the game is rated so highly, solitaire. And then you're gonna have different boards for different scenarios, and the production values are really impressive. This is one of the boards, for example. This is another one, and so you have 10 scenarios, and they will use different boards. Again, 4 are intro, then you have several based on actual confrontations, such as Coral Sea, such as Midway, Eastern Solomon, and then you have several fictional scenarios. And here is one of the boards, the one for the Eastern Solomon. You're gonna have game pieces that go on the board, but well, that's not gonna be like super exciting because you're gonna look like that. By the way, I place some game pieces there kind of randomly, and also on the player race that you will see later. And they're gonna look like this. They're gonna look like task forces. They indicate just the kind of task force represented by the marker. So it marks the position. If you're playing the game as written, these will be face down, so the opponent doesn't really know which ones are the task force. I mean, which one is which, and also which ones are the dummies. And so, again, playing as written, they will look kind of like this. If you know the topic, of course, the idea of not knowing exactly who is there at all, where people are, and the entity and composition of the task forces of the opponent is kind of important. Now, so even the ones that are not dummies are just fairly, quote-unquote, unexciting task force markers. But in nothing else, they're exciting the fact that they're so well produced. Everything is printed on thick cardboard, and I have to show you, even the player rates, even the humble player rates are sturdy cardstock. Very nice. So, but here's really the heart of the game, in a sense, is partially what happens there, but most importantly what happens down here on these player rates. These displays, one for the Japanese player, one for the American side. This is folded in two, but because otherwise it would take a lot of space. And then you also have the turn track, which also is its own little cardboard display/player rate with a lot of important information telling about things that happen in different turns. Yes, the transports, AK movement right there. They only move every other turn in daytime turn. I always forget about that. So, different turns will have different rules. The scenario that you choose will tell you when a scenario starts and ends, and you will place markers there to indicate that. And again, there's slightly different rules for day turns and night turns. But we're talking about these displays on which you will place tokens representing ships and airplanes. As you can see, this is where you will place the forces represented by those markers. So if we have a Task Force 9 on the board, when somebody interacts with that marker there, they're actually interacting with these ones. And you have two types of task force. One the one that goes in a straight line like this in a column, and then the most important ones, really the heart of the game, the carriers that will be in the sort of like circle formation, is called in the rule book. Looks more like a cross to me. And so most likely you will want to place your carrier right in the middle, surrounded by some powerful ships that can protect it. And then you're going to have a mini display with aircraft connected to that one. So these are the ones for the Kaga, for example. And this display has a combat air patrol area, a ready area, so for aircraft that is on the deck and ready to go. 2 landings, if landing from map and landing from cap, and the reserve. After the aircraft land, they're going to reserve and then they can go somewhere else. As you can see though, those tiny arrows. So during the aircraft phase of a turn, basically you can play with these ones around. So I can choose to send some people from the ready section to a raid, and then I'll place them on the board within a range of 5, usually 5 hexes, where they're gonna attack and raid somebody. There's no other reason to place them on the board otherwise. Or you can place them from the ready if they were there from combat, air patrol, from air patrol to ready. At the end of the turn, those raiders say, yeah, those raiders, the survivors, come back and land from map. And then later they can go here. So basically each turn during the air phase, you will move these around. As for the markers that you see here, the numbers that you see on them are the power to be used against aircraft, the firepower to be used in naval battles, and then the number here in the bottom left corner is the durability, so how much damage they can take before they take real damage. Meaning, if a ship takes damage equal to its durability exactly, then it takes a marker called minor damage. And there is a way, then if it doesn't take damage next turn, that becomes emergency repair. If it doesn't take damage again, then it's removed. If it takes damage equal to its durability +1, it is flipped to its serious damage side, which also has a lower, usually a lower durability. If then it takes damage equal to or higher than the reduced side, on the reduced side, then blah, 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 it's gone. As it takes damage, aircraft may also take other effects. For example, it may be that the aircraft cannot land on it, but if you have any, you can still launch them. It may also be that actually it can't launch, and then, well, that's what it is. They can still land, but once they get there, they can't leave anymore. Luckily enough, you have a little bit of flexibility, so if you send people on raids and they cannot go back home, then they can land onto other carriers in range. So these are some of the main concepts here, and again, different scenarios, so the different conditions will depend on the scenario, and of course they will match historical circumstances. You'll try to you will try to act or to pursue the same objectives that people pursued historically. You're just trying to go better. Each turn starts with a movement phase in which your ships will move, again, depending whether they are face up or face down. And you will move the dummies as if they were real ships, and pretty simple. During the day, each ship moves by 1. During night turns, they move by 2 spaces. And again, air transports, they don't move quite as much during the day. They move only every other day turn. After the movement phase, you have the naval battle, which will be between actual forces that are next to each other. Like that would be the occasion for a naval battle. Important difference between day turns and night turns. At night turns, everybody fires. It's just blind shooting in the air. During the day, only the ships in a confrontation that have the longest range will actually get to fire. So if we have this task force 7 versus 9 here firing at each other during the day, not everybody gets to fire. Remembering the longest range is kind of easy because you look at the codes and they're alphabetical. So BB goes before C and C goes before D. Pretty simple. Once you have that, once you determine who is going to fire against whom, resolution is pretty simple. You take your super fancy sturdy cardstock player aid and you look at the section for naval combat, and super simple. Roll a single die, cross-reference the total firepower of your forces firing in that confrontation, and you have the number of hits that you inflict on the opponent. And the Japanese have a penalty of a bonus of +1, a bonus of +1. Pretty simple, right? Then it gets to the aircraft phase, to the air power phase, which is a little more involved. Also, you roll dice to determine who goes first, as opposed to the other turns. There's an initiative play. The other phases of the turn, there's an initiative player described on the turn. So as I said, that's the air operation phases when these guys move around, but of course the most important thing is when you launch raids. And suppose that we're gonna launch a raid and we're gonna attack. Why don't we attack the Kaga? Let's do that. So somebody has attacked the Kaga. Let's say the North Carolina. No, the Enterprise. The Enterprise attacked the Kaga. So you remove them from the display where they're from, and you send them on the board. And actually, after I send them on the board, I'd like to place them where they need to go. And so this is the Air Patrol defending the Kaga, and these are the Raiders coming in. As for the aircraft, if they have a number here on the left side, that indicates their bombing value, and the number in the top right corner indicates their air power. So here we have the zeros of the Combat Air Patrol of the Kaga. They're going to try to stop that incoming group. First, they will love to go for the bombers, but there is an escort, meaning there is a aircraft that does not have bombing. So these are the escorts. So the Combat Air Patrol has to engage that first if one is available. And then the remaining ones will engage on the other one. So we prepare those two duels, and then these people will go through and bomb the Kaga directly. For each of these, we're going to resolve the combat, and it's very simple. It's based on differential between the firepower of the interceptors minus the firepower of the raiders. So 5 trying to block in a 3. We'll look at the aerial combat chart on our super fancy sturdy cardboard. Player 8, there you go. Air combat chart. 5 minus 3 is 2. We're going to look at this column. We roll a die, possibly apply modifiers, and then we look at the result, which will be a number of steps that may be lost by the raiders and or by the interceptors, the I. And if those hits are inflicted against an incoming bomber, usually the incoming bomber is sent back. They took some bruises and they go back, unless the result is here in this orange color, then the bomber goes through. So the result will be a number of hits taken by either or both sides, and possibly some of these bombers going through, but most likely being turned back. So when we resolve that, we're going to know how many bombers are actually getting to the Kaga. Suppose, for example, that this one takes 2 hits and is eliminated. This one takes 1 hit only in that confrontation. Then we resolve that one. That one takes a hit and is not allowed to bomb, so it goes back to the landing from map of its own section. And then what's next? These one actually make it through. So now we're going to resolve the bombing. Not yet. The anti-aircraft combat. These factors are going to be added together against the incoming bombers. Now, if you're attacking one of the escorting vessels, that's all you have to worry about. No one supports them. You attack the Chikuma, they attack it with anti-aircraft of 2. You attack the Kaga, everybody goes to defend it together, so you're going to defend against 10. Once you have the anti-aircraft total that goes against your incoming bombers, I think you know it. It's pretty simple. It's really just like roll dice and check your combat tables. Although you have many combat tables, again, they're simpler to read than a lot of other combat tables in wargaming. And so that's the entire air chart. So say it's a total of 10, roll the dice, cross-reference, and the results are the number is the number of hits taken by the incoming bomber. Suppose that that's the result. These bombers are taking 1 step of damage. And then they have +3 that will be applied finally on the die roll for bombing the air-to-surface chart. We look at the column indicating the actual bombing power of the remaining bombers. That would be 6 in this case. We roll a die, we modify with the modifier that we got here, that would be +3, and that tells us, suppose in this case 3 + 3 6 on the 6th column, then we just score 6 hits against the Kaga. And depending on the durability, now we know if we did damage and how much. Oh, Kaga! 6 hits against the Kaga that has a durability of 5 is just that +1, which is just enough to flip it to its serious damage. It sounds like a lot for air combat operations, but it's very intuitive because, well, you send in your bombers, the combat air patrol, if there, tries to intercept them. Then the people in the sea try to shoot at you. Then whoever is left will bomb the people in the sea. And that's how it works. You also have bases that really kind of work like unmovable ships. They have their own display where again you'll place a marker to indicate which one is which. You have the same display where you move your airplanes around. There is a couple of different rules, but the general idea remains the same. At the end of the turn, you had the recon phase where you're supposed to draw, to use your aircraft within range to search face down markers on the board. You will draw these tokens and you will know then if somebody was detected or not detected, like contact lost or misdirection. There are specific rules about this, but they don't matter all that much if you're playing the game two-handed solitaire. Now, for my conclusions. I'm a bit surprised that the game was rated 7 out of 10 for solitaire suitability. Again, maybe on the account of the 4 solitaire training scenarios, but all of the main scenarios have that element that you're supposed to play with the tokens face down, with dummies mixed in with the other ones, and use the recon phase at the end of a turn to figure out who is where, which seems pretty important historically. Now, I played the game two-handed solitaire, and usually I don't have a problem. I love playing games that way, controlling both sides to the best of my possibilities. It works very well for war games in particular. But here I did feel that, well, I was missing something. The game really seems to be designed with that stealth, with the misdirection, with the secret information element in mind, and there is absolutely no bot to guide you there. I found a thread on Board Game Geek. Somebody recommended play with one of the 2 sides face down and your own side is face up, and you still use your searches and you flip those face up. It still seems strange. I tried that way. And I felt that it was a lot of work for not a lot of gain. Things are weird because, of course, dummies would be launching searches where there's not supposed to be anybody. For example, task forces, I don't know where they are, so they move a lot faster than they're supposed to because I don't know where they are, and so on and so forth. So, after trying that, I simply played the game with the correct markers face up on the board, perfect information. So I don't know if that's gonna affect I still enjoyed the game, but I don't know that I was able to play the game as written. Again, that's I want to make sure if you're expecting a game that the 7 out of 10 solitaire, you should know these things so you don't then write an angry letter to the publisher. So, other from that thing that I possibly played a perfect information variant, it still captured a lot of the flavor, a lot of the elements of the topic, so I still felt that the game was reasonably thematic because of the way the aircraft work and the air operation works. And the rulebook even says that is the game. That is the main thing is the carriers is sending massive raids against the opponents and try to sink them. The game is designed in such a way that it doesn't pay off to launch small attacks. You really want to play with your cycle of airplanes until you're able to massive attacks, coordinating possibly from different sources. and you go through those combat air patrols. So there's a specific flow of the game that emerges as you play, which again feels very thematic, to the point of feeling uneven compared to other topics, compared to other games. You may have a game, Coral Sea, the first day not much happens, people are mainly approaching each other, and by the end of the second day, then everything happens in a couple of turns that are going to be very intense. Naval combat, so when you're adjacent to each other, is not nearly as important, but it is fun when it happens, because at least happened to me. I started neglecting that, and so I was just being very cavalier with my carriers launching these massive attacks, and I allowed some of the other ships of the opponent that don't have carriers but have good firepower to get in range. And so I realized, well, I need to maneuver so that I can keep that range advantage against these other people that have a shorter range. They need to be adjacent, but they can be deadly if I neglect that. So that felt like possibly the naval combat felt like possibly like a sideshow, but not useless, not unnecessary. And so there are very interesting interactions here that happen. Again, it's a very unique topic. That's why, for example, I had this unique pace, the different rules for different forces that make the game a little fiddly. But if you go into a game with this topic, it means that you're interested in the historical events and the forces at play. You're willing to digest a couple of extra rules and a degree of fiddliness. And I think it's a good trade-off. I think if you go through those things, then you have a game that really captures a lot of historical flavor. You have different scenarios, so different situations. You can create your own fictional scenarios. Because really, between midway, well, the hunter turns into the hunted from Coral Sea, then we need to go through those forces as the Americans to be able to prevent the transport from reaching Port Moresby. You have different flows, you have different situations, you have different scripts, and the game, once you start playing it, feels a lot less fiddly than in the overall description that I gave you. I found myself being very excited when it was time to resolve the air phase, and maybe it took me a couple of turns to maneuver where I was just in range but not in danger of other things, and I have the perfect combination of bombers with maybe an escort on deck ready to go. Lot of interesting situations, lot of interesting action. It is a dynamic game that flows very well if you're willing to put in the effort of going through quite a number of rules, and then smaller rules, and then smaller rules. Nothing that would scare a seasoned war gamer, but although the rulebook claims that the game is so suitable for new players, as long as they're willing to start from the training scenarios, I think that this can be a bit daunting for somebody just starting. But hey, it's all about you new wargamer watching me. It's all about how much homework you want to put into it and how much strength of will you want to demonstrate. In general, Task Force is a game with stunning production values. Rulebook with, again, a lot of teeny tiny rules that you'll have to go through, but then it's a good investment, I believe, for gameplay that is fluid, thematic, very engaging, and full of variety thanks to the many scenarios.